Hello, today we're going to go over the 8.4.3 update to the 2019 version of Enterprise Alert, and more specifically, the update to the authentication for Exchange with users using Office 365 and therefore Azure Active Directory service. Inside the EA web portal, click on the System menu option and click on your notification channels, and inside of here, you're going to see your emails listed out. Click on whichever email is your Exchange email service. Inside of this Exchange email notification channel, you're going to notice for the account credentials, it's going to be set to basic authentication. Unfortunately, Microsoft is stopping support of basic authentication for users using the Office 365 version of Exchange and the Azure Active Directory services. So we had to add a couple new authentication options. So if we click on this drop down, you're going to see a couple new options here. The Use Oauth application credentials and Use Oauth user credentials. The difference here is the application credentials give Enterprise Alert access to every email account in the domain, whereas the Use Oauth user credentials just gives Enterprise Alert access to the one email account. The difference between these two options is the Use Oauth application credentials gives Enterprise Alert access to all of the email accounts inside the Active Directory service, whereas Use Oauth user credentials just gives them access to the single mailbox that you input inside the email address box. This can be used for if you set up a shared mailbox. You can allow multiple Active Directory users to access one shared mailbox without having to use a Active Directory user license to set up a mailbox for a user that allows other users to share. This is setting up a shared mailbox inside of the Azure Active Directory without using a user cal. And in order to do that, you need to launch the Microsoft admin and log in as an administrator user to this admin account. And once you're into the admin center, you can go ahead and click on the groups option, expand that down, and click on the shared mailboxes. And inside of here, you can create a new shared mailbox. And once you have that shared mailbox, if you click on the name, you can go to the members and you can add new members to that mailbox. You'll see here that I have 2 members added to this one mailbox, so both of these users can access this mailbox without having to use a third Active Directory license to create a user with a generic mailbox that everybody can access. This creates that generic mailbox without having to use any extra licenses through the Active Directory service. So for starters, we're just going to use the application credentials just so we can see this in use. You'll notice now that we have a new box for directory, tenant ID, application client ID, and client secret. All 3 of these are mandatory and must be filled out. So now how do we get this information? If you have an on-premise version of Exchange, then you can just go to your Exchange admin and you'll be able to get the tenant ID, the application ID, and the client secret from that Exchange admin user. However, if you use Office 365 Exchange, then you need to be able to get this information from the Azure AD. In addition to getting this information, we must also register the Exchange application inside of Azure AD to allow back and forth communication between Enterprise Alert and the Exchange service. So in order to do that, we've supplied you with a script. To reach that script, just minimize this window. To reach that script, you can either navigate to the Enterprise Alert EA Admin Tools folder, or if you just minimize down to your desktop, you'll notice that we have a shortcut to the EA Admin Tools folder on the desktop. And inside this folder, you'll see a new PowerShell script called exchange_register channel app.ps1. This is the script that's going to allow a Exchange admin user to register the Enterprise Alert app inside of Azure AD and also give you the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret. So next we want to run this PowerShell script. So now we need to go ahead and run the new PowerShell script. So in order to do that, go ahead and open up a PowerShell window, and we're going to change the directory to the admin tools folder, and then we're going to go ahead and run the PowerShell script. In order to do that with proper permissions, just put a a period, backslash, and then the PowerShell script name. Run the script, and this will kick off. And first thing it's going to come up with is a box to log into your Microsoft. And this is looking for anybody that has administrator access to the Microsoft Azure Active Directory service. That's the user that needs to log into here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as that user for our side. Okay, so now, unfortunately, I already have it installed on my system, so I'm getting this option saying, would you like to delete the application for reinstall? If at any point you want to switch from the application credentials to the user credentials and it's already installed, you're going to have to go ahead and say yes to this delete and reinstall option. And then that'll bring up this second portion. And the second portion is what will show up right off the bat if you don't already have it installed. And you'll see here that we have two options. And option number one is the option to allow the application credentials, which allows Enterprise Alert to have access to all mailboxes. And then option two is the option for the user credentials. And this one allows that Enterprise Alert to have access to just the single mailbox of the user and password that you input into the system. So for our purposes now, I'm going to go ahead and click on number one. And this will load up. And I'll see here I have my Oauth application credential type, and my tenant ID, my client ID, and my client secret. And I can go ahead and copy those into Enterprise Alert now. Now, once that's done, you can go ahead and save inside your Enterprise Alert, but we're not done yet. We have to still allow Enterprise Alert to have access through the Azure portal. And there's two options for that. The first option is you can actually go into the Azure portal and you go ahead and click on the search for app registrations. And inside of here, you'll see the Enterprise Alert Exchange Channel app. And if you click on that and then click on the API permissions menu option, you'll see the Enterprise Alert application options in here. And then you can click on Grant Admin Access for Test Derdack or for whatever your domain is. However, we can also do this through the PowerShell script. You'll notice at the bottom we have a little blurb sentence here saying that administrator permission needs to be granted to the registered application. Would you like to do that now? We say yes to this, and we'll have a new browser window show. And then you're going to once again sign into the same Microsoft account that has Azure AD admin privileges. And then we're going to get this permissions requested, except for your organization. So this is a list of all the permissions that the Enterprise Alert is asking for. And by clicking on accept, you're saying yes, they can have these permissions. So when I click on accept, the window is going to load up and it's just going to be a blank window. I can go ahead and close out of that window. And if I go back to my PowerShell script, it tells you that once you've consented to the access, you can close your browser window, and then you can click on any button to continue, and that brings you back to the prompt. So if I go back to my email and click on the save option, now we'll go back to the top screen, and it'll go through the authentication, and my email is going to be set to OK. That means it can read through it. It's authenticated. On the Azure side, if you want to double check the access or revoke the access for any reason, you can go to your Azure portal, and we're just going to click on app registrations down here. And inside of there, you're going to see the Enterprise Alert Exchange Channel app. And if I click on this and then go to API permissions, you're going to see the app and you're going to see that it has permissions. You can remove the permission for this anytime you want or revoke admin consent if you're an admin. For any reason, you need to do that. I'm going to go back to my Enterprise Alert and I'm going to change it from OAuth application credentials to OAuth user credentials. When you change to the use OAuth user credentials, you'll see that you still have the directory tenant ID and the application client ID boxes. However, instead of a team secret box, you now have a username and password box. And this username and password is any user that has access to the mailbox that you enter inside of the mailbox email address field. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm just going to go ahead and run this a second time. And it's going to have me log in again. And it's going to ask me, do you want to delete to reinstall? Say yes to that again. And I get back to the same screen. This time, however, I'm going to choose option number 2. And see here we have the client ID and the tenant ID again. The client ID might change will change every time you run it. So you will need to update the client ID. But the tenant ID is going to stay the same. So I update my client ID, and then it's going to tell me my username and password needs to be the username with access to the mailbox that Enterprise Alert should connect to, and password being the password of the same account. So for our purposes, we're going to put in a shared mailbox in here, and then we're going to put in a username for any user that has access to this shared mailbox. Now it's going to ask me if I want to register again. I'm going to go ahead and once again say yes to this. It's going to open up a new browser window, and I'll log in as that same AD user, and I'll get the same requested apps permission page. Once I click on accept to this, I go back to the blank page, and from there I can come back to my PowerShell and click on any button. So that's done. Now let me go ahead and go back into my Enterprise Alert application and input my password. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, and you'll go back to the notification channels, and you'll see the email channel authenticates itself again, which means it's now ready to start accepting emails and creating alerts from the incoming emails.